McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse action figure review, and this time it is one of their MegaFigs, their deluxe oversized figures, and of course I'm talking about the Man-Bat. Overall, I've had some mixed feelings when it comes to McFarlane's DC Multiverse line. It's been very hit and miss for me, but I've been really impressed with their recent offerings and their recent output, particularly the ones that focus on characters, designs and costumes that I'm very familiar with and quite passionate about, and that is chiefly Batman's Rogue Gallery. And it's really nice to see them looking back across all eras now, rather than just the most recent output in terms of the comic books or films. It's great to see them looking back, harking back to the 90s era, for example, as we've seen with some of their Nightfall figures, which has been really cool to see. And I've also noticed an upswing in quality in some of these figures as well. I was really impressed with both the Bane and the Mr. Freeze figure, and I'm really anxious to take a look at the Man-Bat today. So let's get into it and start with the packaging. Of course, this is oversized packaging because we're dealing with a larger than life figure here. This is still in the 7-inch scale, but of course he's towering above 7 inches. He's probably coming in closer to about 10 inches, I would say, in height. So this is a big figure, and of course he's going to need a big box. Now, in terms of the branding and the design, pretty familiar, pretty consistent with what we're used to seeing from the DC Multiverse line. Mostly window display. Of course, behind the figure we have this interior sort of collage in a sort of a blue and white, which really helps this figure stand out because he's much darker toned. So this looks really good. In terms of the actual branding and the borders of the packaging, which is just basically black bars, you know, it's pretty bland, it's fine. It's not the most exciting packaging in the world, especially when we think about the side panel here. When we look at this, it seems like an awful lot of space is being wasted here just to give us a title card saying Man-Bat. And yeah, it's consistent with the other figures in the line, so you can stack these up on your shelf, but it's not the most attractive look. To be honest, it'd be great if we had some artwork here that really encapsulated this character. Now, if we flip the packaging and look at the reverse, we get just that, and I think this artwork they've chosen here, brilliant. I love this. This is definitely capturing the spirit of the character. It's a much more modern interpretation of the character, but wow, what fantastic artwork that we're seeing here. I'm very, very evocative of this very scary creature. And I'm pleased to say, as soon as you open this figure up, you get a real sense of the weight and quality, because he is a hefty figure. You can feel that weight in your hand, which gives you a real sense of reassurance that this is going to be quite robust and stand pretty solid. I've been critical of some of the Spawn offerings from McFarlane Toys in recent years, because some of their oversized figures have felt very lightweight and very plasticky. That is not the case here. This is a solid, robust figure. And in terms of the sculpting, wow, there's an awful lot of detail in this sculpt, and you have to give them a lot of credit because I think they've done a tremendous job with this figure. If we just look at the face, for example, we can see all the individual fangs, the tongue, we can see the eye holes there, the sockets, and of course all the hair and the grooves and lines in the ears and around the collar and the chest. There's so much detail. If we look at the wings, we can see the individual lines and veins. It just looks really, really textured. It looks fantastic, and there's some great paint apps here as well to really emphasize some of the colorings here and give it a lot more detail and texture. So cannot fault this. I think this is a pretty fantastic sculpt all round. I did want to point out he has this sort of rubber collar. I'm not quite sure what the point of this is. I assumed it was to aid articulation, but I'm not sure if it actually does, so I'm not sure what the purpose of this is really. But again, if we look at the main torso, of course this is a brand new piece. I don't believe this has been used on any other figure. In fact, none of these parts have been used elsewhere as far as I'm aware. So this looks absolutely tremendous. Again, a lot of detail here, a lot of definition in the muscles and the veins, and yeah, very nicely textured. So this looks pretty fantastic all in all. Of course, one of the main features of the Man-Bat are his wings, and it's an interesting challenge, I think, for a toy company, is how they're going to be able to do that, to be able to give the detail and also have articulation. Now, the choice they've opted for here is to actually remove the articulation in the wrists and tie the wings directly into the forearm, but leaving enough space between the forearm and the upper arm there to allow articulation to move at that point. And I think that's a pretty fair compromise. It still looks pretty effective either way. And of course there are two flaps there, so one wing on the upper bicep area, tricep I should say, and one on the lower forearm there, and put them together it creates a nice meshed effect. So I think this works really quite well. I think they've made the right decisions when it comes to articulation versus the wing detail. Now, of course, his legs are also bespoke here. He's obviously got that sort of crouched effect, that sort of dog leg effect for his legs. So this works really well. This looks fantastic. I love the ripped jeans and how they've caught individual threads in there. Should also mention that his pants, of course, are made of rubber. So again, that's to hide the articulation. So it does a nice job of disguising that. And I really like this effect with the legs, the way they're sort of bowed. I think this looks really good. Now, his wings are sculpted, they don't fold out, so they are sculpted into this sort of folded position, but you can position his arms out. So if you fold his arms all the way out, you do get this sense of them being fully expanded, which looks pretty cool. So you get to have both looks really, and again, they've had to make that compromise between the folded look and the fully open look, and I think this is the best way of achieving either and keeping it practical for display purposes. The only other way to have done this, I suppose, was to give him two swappable arms and have fully extended wingspan. That could have been interesting, but sadly they didn't opt to go for that. But I think if you're not going to do that, then this is a pretty clever way of giving you both effects. So let's take a look at the articulation then. He does have a swivel at the head. Now, at first I thought it was a ball joint, but you can't really get it to nod up and down at all. He really can only turn it from side to side, so that's something to be aware of. As I said, he does have this sort of ruff around his neck, so he can spin that around as well, but it doesn't really move forward or backwards, which is a shame. Now, he does have ball joints at the shoulders, and he can kick those arms all the way up and out, which is going to be pretty crucial if you want him to have that sort of full wingspan effect, which works really well. Now, he does have a straight hinge at the elbow, so he can hinge that lower arm to roughly 90 degrees. Now, at first I thought this might be a pin swivel, but it doesn't seem to want to move from side to side. Now, he does have a ball joint in the upper torso, so he can move from side to side, lean left and right, and of course he can bend forwards and backwards. So this is great stuff by itself, but then there's extra ball joint in the waist. So again, he's got even more articulation here that allows him to move from side to side and bend forwards and backwards. And when you combine these, you can get some pretty good movement out of his torso. There's more ball joints in the hips, so the legs will kick out to the side, they'll kick forwards and backwards a little bit, and of course his knees are bent, but they also have articulation that will allow him to bend a double joint there at the knee. Now, there's a swivel at the ankle, and there is a hinge there as well, so that foot can go all the way forwards and backwards, a really good range of motion, and then finally there is some toe articulation as well. And of course, the big question is, how does he scale against our DC Multiverse Batman? Well, the answer is pretty well. Now, the Man-Bat, of course, is open to interpretation, and it depends on the artist who's drawn him, but traditionally, he's a pretty big beast, and he should be considerably bigger and broader and taller than Batman, and as you can see, he is here. He's a good head and shoulders above Batman and much broader and much scarier. So I think they've done a pretty good job with the scaling here. This looks pretty nice, but if you want to increase that differential, you can always swap the Batman out for Greg Capullo DC Collectibles version, which I always like to do because he's just a little bit smaller, and it just makes some of these oversized characters seem even more monstrous and more imposing. So I actually quite like this. I think I actually prefer this. Again, it just makes the Batman Bat even bigger, which I think is pretty cool. Now, sadly, the Man-Bat does not come with any extras or accessories. It's one of the weaknesses of the McFarlane Toys line, in my opinion, is that they don't really tend to go in for an awful lot of that. They don't give you extra hands or extra bits and pieces as a general rule, and I think that's a real shame. But hey, I think in the case of the Man-Bat, you don't need anything else because this guy's pretty impressive by himself. So, all in all then, in terms of my final thoughts, I think this is a really impressive figure. I really love this character. I've always really liked this terrifying nature of this giant creature, and for me he's got to be easy 4 stars. I think it's a really nice figure. He's really weighty and hefty. He's got an awful lot of detail, very nicely painted and sculpted. He looks scary, and of course he scales beautifully with Batman, as he should. So all in all, I think this is a really solid entry, a fantastically oversized figure, and works very well in this line. The reason he's missing a star, I think, for me, is just, yeah, I feel like they could have done something a little bit extra considering the price tag. It would have been nice if they'd given him some swappable arms so he could have the full wingspan, but this is close enough. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.